Welcome to the Proven Podcast, where it doesn't matter what you think, only what you can prove. Our guest today is Robin Thurston, CEO of Outside Interactive Inc., a technology and media executive who has built and scaled digital platforms by combining data, community, and outdoor lifestyle brand into powerful business ecosystems. Robin has proven that strategic innovation and audience-driven platforms create lasting competitive advantage. The show starts now. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Robin, I'm really excited to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
For the 4 or 5 people who don't know who you are, let's give them an idea. Who are you? What have you done?
My name is Robin Thurston. I'm the CEO and founder of Outside Interactive. Outside is a platform to help people get outdoors. That's really the core mission, premise, and sort of vision we have around the organization is we just want people spending as much time as they possibly can in the outdoors. But I've been in sort of tech and sort of health my whole life. I started very young in cycling. I sort of came up through the national team system and went to Europe and raced, and then spent a bunch of years in finance, and then started my first company in health and wellness, Map My Fitness, in 2005. And we just got really, really lucky, and we had two of the first 100 iPhone apps in the App Store in July of 2008. And those apps did incredibly well. I was able to sell that business to Under Armour. More recently, bought that business back from Under Armour, so I own that business back at Outside again. Map My Fitness, we bought back from them last year. And then I ran a consumer genetics company in between after I left Under Armour because I had a non-compete. And then wanted to get back into the outdoors. And so I started Outside Interactive. I started acquiring distressed media assets. I started, putting other parts of this puzzle that we're building together really to inspire people, ultimately activate them and then have them celebrate what they're doing in the outdoors.
So there's a lot that you talk about what you did publicly. What you don't talk about privately is you give people statistics that make themselves pee on themselves for about the last 2, 3 weeks. Because when we had our first call, we first connected, you gave me a statistic that terrified me because we all know that we spend about a third of our life sleeping, which we get that. And I have tried to slim that down as much as I can. God bless being an insomniac, which is not healthy. Don't do it, kids. But you gave me another statistic that made it even worse. So can you give and ruin it for everyone else as well? What is that other statistic that we're talking about?
Well, unfortunately, a child born today is going to spend about 30 years on a screen. And I think that is really mind-boggling when you think about it. I mean, the average American is spending 7 to 8 hours a day on a screen. Kids are only getting 4 to 7 minutes a day outdoors, across the U.S. And, this has resulted in a whole bunch of health impacts like myopia, which used to be, less than 25% of the population is nearing 50% of the population because people aren't staring out into the horizon. They're not spending time outdoors adjusting their eyes to looking at something like the horizon. But then you have really serious health impacts like, certainly, mental health right now, I think globally, I don't think you can talk about it just in the US is, really, really in a bad state. And I believe that that's been primarily driven by people on screens, social media, mobile. All of these things have had a serious impact to us as humans.
It that when you told me that statistic originally, it shocked me. It's been a conversation amongst my group that we've been talking about for a while, and one of the guys came in, we talked about it when Einstein died. They dissected his brain, and the main thing they found is that he had more folds, or for those of you playing at home, wrinkles in his brain, and they said, "Well, this must be something that leads to more intelligence." We find that when we dissect intelligent brains, if they have more folds, they are normally more intelligent. And we're finding with children now that, and this isn't direct causation, but there's less folds the more time you spend on screens. And that might be because you're sleeping a third less or your dopamine hits or whatever it is. So I'm not saying screens, if you stare at them, are going to make your brain smooth, but it's all the habits that go in with it. So when you talk about getting outside, it isn't just a cure-all for that as much as the screen isn't the main issue. It's all the habits that come with it. Am I close on this one?
Yeah, I mean, even something like, taking your shoes off and walking in the grass. Like this isn't, you don't have to go to like a big hike or, some massive adventure. Just taking your shoes off and walking in the grass will reduce your blood pressure in 15 to 20 minutes, right? So just literally connecting to the planet through the, basically the ground will have a material impact on you. And I think, if you look at, all of there's things like in Japan, they call it forest bathing, where you're just out in nature. Now there's a, sort of trending on TikTok is like touch grass, this idea that never in human history have we spent as much time indoors as we do right now, ever. And I think that people are realizing that, we are part of this planet. Like literally, we have the same makeup and fundamentals from a DNA perspective as, you know, other creatures and other, certainly other people and humans on this planet, but we are connected to it. And I don't think that in our current society, that recognition about what it means to, really touch grass means for people on a day-to-day basis and just how important it is. But I fundamentally, if you look at some countries like Sweden and Canada are starting to issue prescriptions for outdoor time. Doctors are prescribing it. And I think that that's a real, I think, testament to how important it is for us as a society to spend some of our time outdoors.
So when you're talking about going outside, this isn't because I know you're an avid cyclist, and we were gonna do this on a bike, just didn't work out right now. We'll do
Next
this
time, next
next
time.
time. We'll do it on the bike, and I'll just
Yeah.
huff and puff the whole time. So I have to prep for like 6 months. So when you're talking about this, you're not talking, I'm a triathlete. You're not talking be a triathlete. You're not talking get out there, huff it out there. You're literally talking about take your shoes off, go outside, stand for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there are things, really simple things like one of the things that during COVID was that there was sort of a pet boom. People got a
Mhm.
lot of dogs, right? And that meant that they had to walk them, and that is frankly very good for you. There's the process of taking your dog out for a walk, and whether that's a mile or that's 2 mile, and it's relatively slow, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a hardcore, what might be sort of visually considered somebody that's an outdoors person, right? I think it's just more being outdoorsy, like just wanting to go out and breathe the fresh air and connect in very very simple ways.
What are the ways that, you're full of these statistics that make me lose sleep, so thank you for that. What are some of the ones that are more positive? Are there things like, we've talked about you're gonna be inside, we're moving away from these little tablets, these little bricks, and we are going towards glasses based. That's just I was talking to a guy from, Google Deepfake, and he's like, "Yeah, it's over. Phones are not gonna be here anymore. They're all gonna be glasses, and it's all gonna be, basically HUDs or heads-up display." We're heading towards this, so we know screens and tech isn't going away. And we know that telling people that it's never gonna happen, that to deal with it, it's tech. What are the ways that you can, when you are stuck inside, that you can mitigate some of this?
Well, I mean, obviously, we're not suggesting that every minute of activity that positively impacts you has to be outdoors. I mean, you just said you're in 5 inches of ice, right? So, I would still advocate, a treadmill, run or walk, jumping on an indoor bike. Certainly, strength training is, really has proven to be one of the most critical things that you can do to, extend not only longevity, but just like the quality of life, right? Just that,
Mhm.
and especially, after 50, I think it's so important. And all those things are things that you can do indoors. Then there are other, sort of, very, I think, very easy things that, people wouldn't necessarily consider exercise. Things like, just even, meditation of some form, right? Everybody has a different form and version of that. But just to calm your mind, right? To not be looking at the screen and staring at it, sort of constantly switching from one screen size to the next, whether you go from your phone to your laptop to your TV, whatever it might be. And, the positive statistics are, pretty clear. I mean, I mentioned, just 30 minutes outdoors will lower your blood pressure. Um, you know, f- Basically, you can see for just 30 minutes outdoors, you can see a 45% increase in productivity. And the way that to me that's measured, like if you think about, during the day, I don't know about you, but I spend some of my day, on phone calls rather than Zoom, just going for a walk
Mhm.
while I'm talking to someone rather than Zoom, because I know that when I get back, I'm going to be more productive, more mentally alert if I've been outside, walking around for that 30 minutes with someone on the phone rather than being on Zoom all day long for 7, 8 hours, staring at people, right? And so I think the other big thing that look, I know there are some people in the world who think that they're going to get off of this rock called Earth.
Mhm,
I don't think I will be off of this rock. I think I'm going to be here my whole life.
mhm.
And I think that one thing about being in nature that's very positive is I think that people, quickly realize that they are a part of it and that they want to take care of it. And I think that's another big, thing that we see when whether it's kids, whether it's adults, spend time in the outdoors. They just feel a greater connectivity and think about things like sustainability a lot more than if they aren't spending time outdoors.
So, I think it's beyond just that as well, and you're a very successful entrepreneur. You mentioned that you went back and you bought your business back and you've done these things. How have you integrated this? Because I agree with you. I will schedule entire blocks of time where I'm like, I'm gonna get my steps in. There's no way around. I'm getting my steps in every day, even if there's 5 inches of snow or solid ice outside Kershaw, Lexington, Kentucky. I'm gonna get it in. When you're doing this, how have you integrated this into your org? How are you doing this where you're setting up instant your command and how does that work for you?
Well, I mean, I think first on a personal level, and I think this really does extend out to not only my direct team, but how I think about the flexibility that we have as an organization to do these things. But at a personal level, I think a lo for those of your listeners and, viewers that, know about, sort of finance and how, how dollar cost averaging works, like, it's probably one of the
Mhm,
most powerful things in investing that has ever been created, right? Like, you put $1 away a week, and then all of a sudden, 20 years from now, you look up, and because you put it in, whether you put it directly in Google or you put it in some other stock or whatever you put it in, you're sort of surprised at the compounding effect of that, right?
mhm,
Well, health and wellness is really similar. You can't cram, right? Like, what I'd call like, somebody, let's say you're going to run a marathon. If you try to train 2 weeks before the marathon, I mean, you're not going to have a great event, right? You have to lead in and build into it. And so the way that I think about fitness, and, you just said you just got done, being active. I just got, done off the bike, is that I personally try to do it early in the morning, when I'm certainly fresh, cognitively fresh, and kind of can feel like I'm in sort of a meditative state, whether that's indoors or outdoors. And again, then during the day, like, how do I take not necessarily breaks where I'm sitting around, maybe, eating something, but like where I'm actually out doing something, right?
mhm,
Another thing that's been proven is like even a 20-minute walk after you eat is really, really critical, right? For
mhm.
just your whole digestive system and everything. And so those are some of the things when I think about personally how to keep that consistency going, right? Like how do you just keep thinking about paying yourself first rather than all of the other things in your, sort of, your ecosystem, whether it's your family, whether it's work. When it comes to outside, I mean, one is we have 15 national holidays. Two of those happen to be outside days for the staff. One is in the spring, one is in late summer, where we actually give the day off for team to spend time, going to do something that could be skiing, cycling, whatever it might be. We are, a company that does flexible time away, which means the ultimate flexibility for employees to choose when they are going to take a break. And, so we don't mind if someone's out, doing something at lunch and then they're back for meetings. And then, certainly we lean in with like benefits, sort of residual stipends for people to get like things like gym memberships or equipment or things like that as part as of the overall sort of benefits of the company. And then obviously, my view is that luckily for our team that, we have about 400 people that are spending all of their time thinking about also how to get other people outdoors. So often they get inspired themselves, right? They see visuals, they're telling a story, they're doing something, they're at an event, and they're like, well, I want to come back and do this, or I want, I'm going to tell friends about it. So I think that we have set the company up in a way that really gives people the latitude to be able to think about outdoor time and how they think about their health and wellness. Not saying we don't work hard. We have lots of goals and KPIs, just like any company. But ultimately, I think our team is very aligned with what we're trying to do for the customers that, connect with our platform.
I think there's a blueprint there that a lot of founders are a little nervous about. When they go through and they have this conversation and they look at it like, "Hey, I see what he's saying. I wanna do this. This makes sense, but how do I tactically do this? What is the ROI that happens off this? If I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna give my team the ability to do A, B, C, D, whatever it is, um, what is the ROI that happens with this? How does the culture change? How do we handle that along with integrating AI into this?" Because now with AI, it's, I think there's 2 very specific camps. There's the fear mongering, "Oh my god, this is gonna purge everything, we're all gonna die." And then there's a, "Holy shit, this is really just gonna performance-wise radically increase our ROI." So I think that's the kind of divide. When you're doing this, is there a specific ROI you could talk about that has come from giving people this so other founders can be like, "Okay," and then also teaching other founders how to do this and how to integrate this into their systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go back to something like the very basic research around productivity, just like if people do this, that they are going to be more productive. I think that's, at least for me, why when we talk about it with the team, or when we put certain benefits in place, like I really lean back onto those statistics. But then ultimately, we're fully remote, all 400 people. Like, we have a few small offices, but we are fully remote.
Mhm,
And, I look at, last year's performance, and, if I look at us as an organization, I mean, we were up, 23% year over year. It was the first time as for our organization, we're well over $100 million in revenue. And, it's first time for our organization to be profitable. And so, to me, I guess the main thing I would say is that the flexibility that we provide and give people the latitude, as well as, celebrate the fact that we want people to spend time outdoors, ultimately for us has translated into success for the business. Now, Charles, I'm a typical entrepreneur. Things could always be better, right? I could always but I
mhm,
do think it's a balance. And I don't know. There's so many. We went through this phase. If you think about the workplace, where everybody was like, work life balance is so important. And
mhm,
I would say that, to me, it's kind of like building a company is kind of like, whether it's running a marathon or doing a major event. It's like there are periods where you are at rest. You are out doing the things that make
mhm,
you feel good. And there's other periods where you are going very hard, right? You are pushing yourself to
mhm,
improve. And I think that, in my mind, is the way to build a company. And, the other thing I say to entrepreneurs all the time, Charles, is like, don't forget to celebrate. Like, the
mhm,
one thing, and I wouldn't say I'm necessarily good at it, and I haven't been in building companies before, but now I think about it a lot. It's like, when you have moments of success, make sure that your team knows that those are moments of success, because if they don't, they get sort of trained to just think that it's everyday life, and then they're not really, sort of raising those moments up and saying, "Wow, that's something that we want to do again." Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a curse of being an entrepreneur. We're constantly thinking this could be better and what's next? Because we just grind and grind and grind. It's like, hey, I remember I became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. I was like, uh-huh. And I was with my aunt and my uncle, like, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah, but it's not NYT. And they're like, what the hell, man? And I was like, but I want NYT. So it just became this constant loop. When you're hiring people, so I love that because we have transitioned to this and we are in, an extinction level event for employees, the way that it used to be. Things are changing with AI. We know this. But people are having a hard time hiring for individuals who can be productive at home because it's a mind shift, right? We went from, no, you have to be here, I have to physically touch you, we have to be in meetings, and then COVID got rid of that, and then the entire global workforce became, well, everywhere. Now we're in the situation where people are like, how do I hire the people, hold them accountable? How do I get them to show up in a way that we can hit $100 million? Because you're completely remote and you guys are doing $100 million a year. For most founders, most business owners, and like, we didn't think that was possible. So one of the myths, again, this is why I wanted to have you on here. You keep people's minds with what's possible and also what's happening. Terrifying statistic still. What are the ways that you hire? How do you do this where you're like, hey, I know this person, I know Bob, Susie, Jimmy, whatever it is, they're going to execute at home, even if I give them all this freedom. How have you found a way to process that?
Yeah, I mean, I one is, I really believe in people, and I really believe in people, even what I'd call as AI starts to permeate more and more. I still think The humans are essential in this ecosystem that includes technology, right?
Mhm,
But I really, I mean, there's a couple things. One is I think you have to find people that are incredibly curious.
mhm,
Like that's something like when I'm interviewing people, and I don't get to interview everyone that we hire now, but a lot of them I do. And I really try to understand, like, is this person naturally curious? Are they,
mhm,
thinking about not only the world around them, but like how they can improve themselves. And some of that might be from, the activities they do. Some might be in terms of the discovery and education that they do on their own. But that's really important, and then I think for us, it's like, really understanding how invested this person is in thinking about, whether they're building a product for us, they're writing content for us, they're, whatever function they're in. Frankly, I don't care if it's in finances, are they really behind our mission and thinking about ways that we are going to transform, sort of these current statistics into new outcomes, right? And, so I would just say that, it's hard. We once a quarter, we're trying to get the teams together. The teams have budget to do, basically, call them offsites, onsites, whatever you want to call them, into areas where, a grouping of people get together. But like, I just got back from one, in Tucson, for our maps team, and, we were together for 2.5 days. We did, 2 big hikes together, like, everybody was out there, really using the tools and understanding, looking at it from a discovery and recording perspective. But it also was a real social bonding moment when you're out there hiking that then makes the rest of the interactions that you're having even easier, right? Like, whether it's in a conference room, whether it's, out in other settings. And so I do think it's really important in a remote culture that you reserve the budget, even over hiring the next person. Reserve the budget that allows you to get together in person. And it's something, frankly, we've struggled with at times, but this year it's really important and high up in, sort of our goal list for how the teams are going to interact this year.
So, getting together, having them play together, there's team building exercises, but how do you measure curiosity? Because I haven't had someone talk about this before in the hiring process. How do you measure if they're curious? Because I measure effectiveness, I measure speed, I measure, are they intelligent enough? Can they find the answers? Because for me, it's always out into out fasting, which is either find a way or make a way. I'm gonna figure this out. That's something that I always look for. I'm like, here's a problem that I know you don't know the answer to, because no one knows the answer to. What do you do now? That's always the litmus test I use. When you talk about curiosity, what is the litmus test do you use for that?
Well, I think again, I think as you're talking to candidates, how they ask questions, how they think about a problem, how much maybe discovery that they've done on their own. That could be things like travel, that could be local discovery, it could be any number
Mhm,
of things. It could be, how sort of engaged they've gotten in a certain activity, and that doesn't necessarily need to be, an outdoor activity, but any activity. Like, how have they learned about that? How much studying did they do around it? How curious were they about that subject, or was it just surface, right? And I do think it's hard. It's very hard to measure. It's very hard. It's much easier to measure, whether it's like, looking at somebody's experience, like, okay, they had X number of years at this company, did this thing, and the same is true of other work that they've done. Like, when you start to ask people about the work that they've done, like, how deep do they go into that question? Like, how naturally sort of curious they about the subjects or the tasks that they were given even at prior roles?
hmm. So when you get curious about certain things, one of the things I'm curious about is how what outdoor activities have you seen that have the best ROI? What are the statistics that show ABC? Because again, as a triathlete, I love running, but I'm gonna miss my knees when they're gone. So I've had to stop running, and the bike's okay, but I've found that swimming is just it's home for me. It's what I love more than anything else. I just get in the water and just put my head down and rock and roll. And now there's waterproof headphones, so I can actually listen to a bunch of things when I'm going, or I just zen out. I adore swimming more than I could possibly tell you. But what are some of the things that you found? Because again, this is what you do. This is what outside does more than anything else. You guys study this and you guys are curious about these things.
I mean,
What are the ones that you recommend?
there are categories that are, like, exploding right now, like, if you look at something like trail running and gravel
Mhm,
cycling, they've absolutely exploded, right? I mean, I know this sounds funny, like, disc golf is on
mhm,
fuego, right? Like,
mhm.
certainly, pickleball, like, if you look at the growth of
It blew
pickleball and
up.
all the outdoor pickleball courts, right?
Mhm,
I think what you said, Charles, is maybe the most important thing, which is you started with something like triathlon and you got to experience
mhm,
3 different types of activities, right? And you
mhm,
found one that
mhm,
absolutely, like, you is your, whether you wanna, your sort of zen, your spiritual moment, it's like you can get
mhm,
into that and just be super focused without the noise, right? And I think that's the most important thing. It's like, if you're if you're hiking and you're just looking at your phone the whole time, which, by the way, is hard outdoors. There's a reason it's hard outdoors to actually look at your phone with your sun bouncing off of it. But if you're
mhm,
just looking at your phone the whole time, that might not be your zen activity, right? So it might make sense to, like, try some other things. And again, that could be something more social. Like, if you look at the explosion with run clubs right now, maybe you need a run
mhm,
club to, like, keep you motivated and keep you focused while you're out there. Other people, it might just be as simple as walking out your back door and doing a 2-mile walk, right? And that might be a
mhm,
moment where you can disconnect from everything. So I think the big thing that I say to people is, like, yeah, for me, it's cycling. It always has been since I was a little kid, and I was lucky to find it early. But, like, try things and try to find that thing that's going to create what you just said, which is that very zen moment for
mhm.
you that is sort of something that you can retain.
And I think when you're finding your zen moments, one of the reasons I like swimming so much is you can't lie. Because if I'm walking, I can turn. I'm like, "Oh, I can half-ass it," or if I'm cycling, I can do, especially on triathlons. I mean, as long as you can sneak the motorcycle in and the officials don't think it's a bike, you're fine. But you can't do that with swimming. Swimming's one of those rare opportunities that if you try and half-ass, you drown. It's just, if you're like, "Oh, I don't want to
You
kick
drown
anymore," you're going
you
out. That's it.
drown or you better get the edge.
You better figure this out really quickly. That's why I love swimming, and I'm not hauling butt. I have one of those endless pools that just keep going. It's like a treadmill basically in water, and I love them. But it keeps me focused, and I have to be completely centered in my body of what's going on. And I'm very lucky. I have
It's
big hands and big
interesting.
feet. It
A
makes
lot of
sense.
I'm not a big climber, Charles. I'm not a big,
Uh-huh.
like, rock climber, but
Mhm.
people say exactly the same thing
Yeah.
about rock climbing, that
Mhm.
because literally, if you fall, you're in big trouble, right?
Mhm.
You are so zeroed in and focused, right?
Yes.
Whereas, like, there are other activities like walking, running, and cycling. I agree with you there that you can sort of zone out a bit,
Mhm.
right? Now, hopefully you're not doing that in traffic and, other places, but I mean, but I totally hear what you're saying about swimming, which is you will sink to the bottom or you will just literally put your feet
Yes.
down and you're done because
Right.
otherwise you're not going anywhere.
And the reason I added in, waterproof headphones was because it gave my brain something to chew on sometimes. Because there are times where my brain's like, "Okay, I've been staring at water. Can we do something else, please?" And I'll just feed an audiobook in. I'm like, "All right, whatever." Buddy of mine, he carved out the bottom of his pool and he put a TV there. So he'll sit there and watch, YouTube or whatever it is while he's swimming with it, and he just sit there and is watching it as he's going. I was like, "That doesn't count, dude. That doesn't count." I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I gotta do it for an hour every day. I gotta do something." I was like, "God bless you, man. God bless you." You've also done something that a lot of people haven't done. You've acquired a bunch of assets or a bunch of companies that were or marketing that were failing. Can you walk me through that? That's something I didn't know prior to having this conversation. When you go in and you're acquiring things that are not as optimized as one would think, how do you evaluate those and how do you make sure that you then integrate them into your folder of business?
Well, I mean, to be clear, the many I mean, there was 2 reasons why we ended up looking at, sort of things that were distressed. One is that, I knew I mean, we have 5 brands that are older than 50 years old, right? That, like,
Mhm,
Ski Magazine is over 80, Warren Miller is almost 80, climbing is over 50, velo's over 50, outside's over 50. But the media business, forget about more recently with AI, even more stress because of what's going on with AI. But the media business has been in sort of a secular decline really since, I would say mobile and social came out, right? Like
Mhm,
just, new ways for people to get information. So, but the brands had a lot of equity in them and a lot of, big libraries, great stories that were, part of these platforms, and we had to make really hard decisions. There was one of the ideas of bringing multiple media businesses together was to create scale, which in turn allowed us to switch from being one primarily advertising, but advertising within what we would call an endemic category. People like
mhm,
North Face and REI and Specialized Bicycles used to be the advertisers of the outside, sort of brands, right?
mhm.
Today, our largest advertisers are autos and they're travel companies and they're insurance companies. So we've diversified away from being really, really dependent on the core outdoor category. Those people, of course, are still advertisers. But the other big thing that we had to do was we had to switch from really being dependent on advertising to being more dependent on reoccurring revenue streams. And so we've gone from at one point, more than 70% of the business was in advertising, and I would argue more than 85% of the business was in non-reoccurring businesses. Today, of our revenue, 40% is advertising, 60% is in reoccurring either SaaS businesses or subscription businesses. And we had to make that transition, but we knew that those businesses had great brand equity, they had great teams, they had people that were part of them that, knew how to storytell and knew these categories, whether it be climbing or running or whatever category one might be in the outdoor space. And by bringing that all together, to me, we've created an ecosystem that has much more sustainability into the future than maybe what it had before.
So I was about to ask how you did that. How did you transfer into that? How did you pivot over into that SaaS model where you went away from it? Because again, Specialized, that's I rode on those for years. They saved my took us many a times. They're great
Great
bikes.
bicycle, great bikes.
They're
And by the
great
way,
bikes.
they're still advertisers, it's just different level of emphasis to what they used to do. One is, again, scale, bringing the companies together had a part of it, but then we rebuilt the tech platform, and we started asking people to log in, and we launched a digital subscription, and we had to get rid of a lot of the print. We only have one print magazine left, which is Outside Magazine. We don't
Mhm,
have Yoga Journal, we don't have Climbing, we don't have any of those anymore because those were really in distress. I mean,
mhm,
most of the media publications, the standalone subscription, like print magazines, were losing $1 million a year each. I mean, it was like they were losing a lot of money.
mhm.
And so we had to go through that, and it was a, you know, I would say a painful transition. I mean, we certainly had reductions in the team over the last 3 or 4 years. There were challenges with doing it, but ultimately to get us to this point where we have a very sustainable business, that the business mix really can support these amazing brands and media that we have today as one of the divisions.
As you've seen that transition from print physical copy into SaaS as an option, and now that we're heading into an AI first model, and when I try to explain this to people, Amazon was an internet first business, period. And everybody else tried to catch up. And then they tried to do it had a mixed model and they just got crushed. We're heading to now an AI first organizations, and that's where we're going. Where do you see outside heading towards? How do you handle that next onslaught? How do you handle that tidal wave that's coming?
I mean, I think what we've tried to do internally is we've tried to educate the team. We've tried to give them the tools. Again, if in the idea that hopefully we have very curious people on our team that are
Mhm,
inspired to get people outdoors, you want to put the right tools in their hand, and hopefully then they'll start to really learn and figure out ways to, leverage that into our own business. And so, what we're seeing is that, whether it's from engineering to marketing to, even our, G&A categories, things like legal, is that there's a lot of experimentation in the use of it. Um, there's a lot of people thinking about ways to maybe accelerate certain parts of things that they did so they can spend more time on other areas that are of, potentially higher value. But I think for what I'd call non-AI first organizations, which by the way, I mean, there aren't many, right? I mean, there are only so many organizations that quote started within the last 3 years that are
Mhm.
really AI first. Every other business is going through a transformation about how do you use these tools and how do you integrate them, right? And I think that we're, where do I think we are? It's a, certainly it's a bit messy. I wouldn't say it's easy. I think
Mhm.
that it's, again, I think you try to educate and put the right tools in people's hands and hopefully good things come out. And then I think on the hiring front, you try to find people that are thinking about AI first. But as an example, there are places where it has amazing use for us. Like one example is something like text to audio. Now all of our articles have audio because of
Mhm.
AI, right? That's
Right.
leverage from our perspective, or text to text in every language. If I had tried to do that a decade ago, Charles, it would have cost me
Yeah.
millions to do
Right.
translation, right? Now, essentially, it's close to free, right? It's the
Mhm.
tokenization and cost to convert a 3,000 word article just isn't very expensive, right? To do
Right.
that in every language on the planet. And so but on the flip side, we also have been very, very clear we don't want, as an example, our written content to be written with AI, right? We want
Right.
storytelling to be real storytelling. And so, again, there are places in our business, it's quite an accelerant, and there's other places where we want to, sort of cautiously go into some of the uses and really, understand the tools before we implement them, at a broader and broader level, right? So, I just think again it goes back to that curious thing. Like if you have people that are curious, they will start to use the new tools. I don't care if it's mobile, I don't care if it's things like
Right.
social, all of them they'll start to use them. And that's what essentially I would say that our organization is trying to do and go through that transition right now.
People who are curious to get outside and to really start doing this and start changing it because 'cause they're seeing things changing. What are some of the statistics? Because we know this all the time. If I put $1,000,000 in a room and make it really hard to get to the $1,000,000, you're probably not gonna go after it. If I release a bunch of lions to chase you to go get in there, you're gonna go get in that room. It doesn't matter about the $1,000,000 anymore. So sometimes we need to take that hammer versus the hug in order to get people where they wanna go. You're the king of telling me some of these things, and before we started recording, you gave me more. What are some of the things that if someone's on the cusp of, "Yeah, maybe I don't wanna go outside," or, all of that you get, the hemming and hawing. What are some of the things that you're like, "Hey, this is what we're seeing," because you know this better than, God, almost anybody I know. What are some of the things that are going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in like I believe 2026 is like the year of the digital detox. Like whether you
Mhm,
look at something like touch grass as a, hashtag on TikTok or
mhm,
Instagram. There's like articles and I'm not saying our publications writing about how unplugging is like the new luxury, right? Like
mhm,
getting that unplug time. And I do think there is a bit of AI backlash in terms of like, just technology. But when I think about the real benefits that people need to think about is this like outdoors is medicine, and I do think
mhm,
look at Gen Z, they're not drinking, Charles, and they're not
mhm,
drinking because they understand the data better than they ever have, right? What's
mhm,
happening to them, whether it's sleep and these types of things. And so, when I think about like, when I think about what's happened, I think we have hit sort of peak screen time
mhm,
and people are thinking about ways and specifically escapes. Like if I look at like the outside ecosystem, the average person in our ecosystem is going like on 14 days of trips a year, like they're going somewhere and they are trying to find places to detox, right? They're trying to find places where they might be offline, they might be disconnected, and again, from my perspective, that's what's so important is like it doesn't again it doesn't matter that you're doing an Ironman, right,
mhm,
Charles, or like a marathon. Like, if you wanna go do that, that's a great way to really
mhm,
have a disconnected type of experience. But, I'm using example, like, if you decide to go on a trip, pick somewhere that is close to nature. Pick a place where
mhm.
you can easily just get out for a little mini walk or a hike or go down into the local town where might do some sightseeing and some souvenir buying, but, like, make it far enough away that, like, you have to, like, pick yourself up and get out of the bed and get away from the hotel to go do that, right?
Yeah, it's the conversation of blue zones, where we talk about some of the things that are in blue zones that make people so healthy, and one of the ones they found was getting outside, but there was a certain incline. if your environment forces you to walk up a certain incline in order to get food, you're going to be healthier than if you have to go downhill. It is what it is. And having those and forcing it, it's really, really simple stuff.
There's a in that book, there's a really good example of, I believe it's Sicily, where there's a ton of
Mhm.
stairs in the
Yep.
town, right?
It's the exact
And
town I was thinking
everybody
about.
has to
Yeah.
walk up and down the stairs, and, again,
Yeah.
to your point, like, just putting yourself in that situation is your blood's gonna start pumping, you're gonna start,
Mhm.
using muscles that maybe you don't use when you're just sitting around on the couch, typing away on the laptop.
I think you said it earlier really well. We live in a society right now where we are spending more time inside than we ever have in humanity, and our bodies haven't evolved for this, so it's unbelievably unhealthy for us. And it really became a challenge for a bunch of us. We sat down and we're like, okay, let's all commit to being accountability partners. 20 minutes a day of what's known as a Navy SEAL burpee, which is a little different than a regular burpee. We're like, we're going to do this, and we were all slacking off on it. We just weren't doing it. I'm just being honest. We're guys. We just weren't doing it. I was like, that's it, enough. So we have a Zoom call every morning, and everyone gets on their stupid thing,
That's
and
awesome.
we're like, all right, let's bang them out. And we're just ripping on each other because we're just having fun. We're just going through the 20 minutes, and it's a bonding exercise. And I remember when we first started this, I am so glad those calls were not being recorded because it's some of the most embarrassing things I've seen with my dear friends, falling all over the floor trying to do these burpees in our boxers and just like this is embarrassing. But it
You know,
became
but
this bonding exercise.
But it's that social accountability I go back
Yeah.
to, like, if you are not good at
Mhm.
getting yourself outdoors or doing some type of activity, like, the social thing will have an impact. So, again, find a run group, find a
Mhm.
walk group, a hike group, a swim group, like, find a group that is going to allow you to get some of that social connectivity, but also social pressure to help
Mhm.
you go do those things because it does make a big difference, right? Like, that's why, to me, I think we're seeing booms in these social running clubs and hike clubs and pickleball clubs and all of these things is because the social, sort of, I don't know, pressure, anxiety, whatever you want to call it, is real and will help you, right?
Yeah, it's just longing to connect, and just because you join a group, just for everybody listening, doesn't mean you have to stay. I remember I joined a climbing group, and we were working on something, and the guy put his hand in a crack and then turned it and made a fist, and then he locked himself in there, and he was working on something else. I was like, "Uh-uh, absolutely not, I'm doing that." I'm like, "You're out of your mind." I was like, "Wait, if
You're like,
you let
I'm
go
not
of your."
doing that.
I'm like, "I'm not doing that." I was like, no." So, finding what works and what doesn't work, like, I love swimming because it allows me to zen out. And I used to tell people this all the time. The reason I became a scuba diver was because my cell phone didn't work underwater, which the truth was my pager
I
didn't
mean,
work underwater, but
hey,
it makes me
if
all
that works to get you off the phone, I'm all for it.
just to get you outside. Are there any beneficial things that are on the phone that you could sit there when you are on a screen, or, be it wearables or some of the scientific data
Oh,
that you're
yeah,
seeing, like,
look, you look at some of even, like, our core applications like Gaia GPS or Trailforks, like,
mhm,
having a map to help you discover where the trailhead is, how far it is, where is
mhm,
that hike from your house, like, yes, there are, nutrition trackers and other things on the phone that certainly, if you're wearing a wearable like an Aura or a Whoop, like, you go get the data on the phone. So I'm not suggesting that there is no use for this technology and you should give it
mhm,
up altogether, but I'm just saying that we are out of balance, Charles. We are not
yeah,
connecting and spending as much time as we should be on, away from our phones, again, even socially, families, with, the outdoors, all of these things are just so important.
mhm.
And, I just think it goes back to, how do you create more balance and how do you create that accountability?
How is outside making the balance between tech and outside? You mentioned a couple pieces of software there. What are the things that you have found like, "Hey, we're very intentional. I know this about your org. You're very intentional about what you deliver and how you guys create it as you're trying to, not only does this have your company thrive, but also have your customers thrive." What are some of those balance integrations that you guys are doing?
Yeah, I'll use something really, really simple. Look, obviously we write a lot of content, we create shows around the outdoors, we license films and, obviously, want people to be inspired through, big adventure storytelling and things of that nature that people might, watch or read on, one of the publications. But I think what's more important for us now is that we create the connection to somebody actually going to do that thing. So, as an example, like if you see us write an article about the top 10 hikes, right? We will embed the maps directly in it so that you can download those maps and then we can see, did the inspiration of that story actually drive you to go do that activity, right? Like go out
Mhm,
because you've discovered it on one of the mapping tools and then you've gone out and logged it, whether that's in Gaia, Trailforks, or Map My Fitness, that you're out there experiencing it. That connection is super important. Or another example is like with our travel software, like we built it so that we could, if we write an article about the top 10 ski resorts, that we're directly getting you to book that trip right out of the article, so that that experience is really seamless because there's nothing more than we want to take you from that moment of inspiration, like, oh, I really want to go to Steamboat and ski,
mhm.
to actually booking it and going to do it, Charles. Like that's what's most important, to creating that connection between, the use of technology and then actually, separating yourself and going to do that actual activity.
So I selfishly wanna know, when you say, "Hey, these are the top 10 this or the top 10 that," because I've scuba dove for a very long time, people are like, "Oh, these are the top 10 places." I'm like, "No, those are not the top 10." I'm like, "Who wrote this?" And I get authentically angry at this. When you guys are creating these lists, how do you guys narrow this down? Because 'Cause I'm authentically curious. How do you decide these are the top 10 hikes or the top 10 this or top 10 that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I think you can debate. I could debate with other cyclists about the top 10 rides in the world, right?
Mhm.
And it's based on my experience, right? Like, I happen to believe that places like Switzerland and northern Italy have some of
Oh,
the
you
best
win.
cycling in the
Absolutely.
world, right?
Mhm.
But I will tell you, like, I just got back from, Maine, from the Maine Tourism and Outdoor Conference, and I can tell you that there are amazing places to ride in Maine, right? But it's, to me, a lot of this is, if you're talking about, us writing and curating these things, some of it's based on data. So we'll look in our database, and actually, because we know where people are hiking, like whether that be in national parks or other places, we'll pull from that data and then use that data to disseminate into storytelling. Hey, here are places that are popular, or here are places that are, not popular but beautiful because we have
Right.
great photos and things like that from them. But ultimately, it does come down to some personal experience. So I think you can always debate whether or not your top 10 scuba diving places are the same top 10 that I would have, right? But I think
Right.
more important than anything is putting that out there for people that maybe have never experienced it and don't know where to go, that they can find places, right?
I think the one exception to the rule is Switzerland. Just Switzerland just wins across the board,
Switzerland,
always.
yeah, I
It's
lived there for 4
Switzerland.
years. It's beautiful. I mean,
God,
it's an amazing
where in
place.
Swi where in Switzerland were you?
I lived 2 years in Neuchâtel, and
Mhm.
then 2 years in Lugano.
Ah, Lugano. Oh my god. Alright, yeah, Switzerland wins. Just for
Yeah.
everybody's paying attention, we could create, outside online Switzerland, and we just win. Just go to Switzerland. It is what it is. When we're going through this, you're a cyclist. Some of the things that are proven for you and some of the things that rank out for you, if you were like, these are the top 10 tools, because everyone will kill me if I don't ask you this. It's the one thing when I told everyone that I was interviewing, like, all right, get his stuff on cycling. We want to know what are his top 10 tools that he loves more than anything else when it comes to like your favorite bike or your favorite this. Or what are the 10 things with cycling that you're like, you gotta do this. This is your thing.
Well, I'll start with the broader health and wellness things. Like, I love 8 Sleep, the
Hmm.
product for your mattress, like, and how it helps you sleep. I've been an Aura user, Aura Ring user, since the very beginning. Like, I have over 6 years of daily data in Aura, and I use it, the score that you get every day, I use specifically to think about my cycling, like how hard I ride on a specific day. Um,
Hmm.
there are certainly other, like I've used Garmin forever. I use,
Hmm.
whether that be on the bike or even from a watch perspective. The nice thing about the new Apple Watch, like one thing I love, I don't love things on my wrist. That's why I prefer something like the Oura Ring. But one
Hmm.
thing I do love about the new Apple Watch is that it has a UV sensor on it, so it can tell you how much time you're outdoors. It literally can
Oh,
measure
nice.
how much time you're in sunlight. So like I love that, just from a ability to give you insights on are you spending time indoors or outdoors, and the impact that's potentially having on your health and wellness. There's a lot of, I mean, look, I could go into detail about things like continuous glucose monitors and, some of the devices that are coming in the future, like,
Mhm,
core body temperature matters a lot when you're training and doing certain types of activities. But the tools and equipment you have are really essential. So like, what bike do I ride? I ride like I ride road mostly and gravel.
mhm,
So, but I ride specialized. Like I ride a Crux for
mhm,
gravel and I ride a tarmac on the road. So the tools are super important to me about having that great experience when you're out there, no matter what it is that you're doing. Same thing in running. Like I would say that, like as an example, I just got this new pair of, Brooks Glycerin Flex. It's like their brand new shoe. It's like
mhm,
an amazing shoe, right? So, like, having the right tools, no matter
mhm,
what you're doing, whether you're hiking, climbing, riding, walking, whatever it is really critical so that you keep coming back. Because if you have a poor experience because of the equipment, then you probably won't do it again, right? So, like, that's what it just matters a lot no matter which activity you're in, that you have the right equipment. And by the way, doesn't mean you can't buy used equipment because there's a lot of
mhm,
good used equipment out on the market too. So like if you're thinking about it from a sustainability or cost perspective, there's lots of places. Like we have this big marketplace called Pink Bike Marketplace, which is the largest mountain bike sort of transaction marketplace, kind of like eBay for, bikes. And I think right now we have 60,000 used bikes listed on Pink Bike Marketplace globally, right? So
nice.
there's lots of places to find great used equipment no matter which category or discipline you're in.
I think there's also 2 things that was subtle in what you just said was, you got 6 years of data on your Oura Ring. That's gonna have a better idea. So if I got an Oura Ring right now, it's not gonna have the same tenacity or same data in there because you're basing off yours, which is an algo based off 6 years versus I'm basing off what would be, a couple months. So there's that. But I also think there's the concept of, there isn't one versus the other. For example, when I scuba dive, I use Zeagle. That's just, I like them
Yep,
because I prefer my secondary on my chest. I use a Zeagle Ranger because I know that what's going to probably kill me down there is not going to be a fish. It's going to be the other diver ripping my first stage out of my mouth. I'm expecting that. So
yeah.
normally when someone runs into it, we'll spit the reg, which means I literally and then it'll fly to the other person, and then I can take my secondary, which is a foot away. I mean, it's 8 inches away from my mouth. You're not going to take it away from me. So it's a matter of what comfortable. And the first one I ever had was a gift. It was a used one, which was wonderful. So it doesn't have to be brand new. It's just the gear you're using that makes you feel safe and makes you want to go outside and makes you want to execute. That I think is going to be really important. Some of the last type of things, you have access to stuff that most people don't. When you're talking about core temperature and you're talking about, maybe glasses that we're using, maybe blue light glasses. Are there other tools that, God, I wish people would use this, or things that you're like, I use these every day and I can't imagine my life without them?
Um, I don't like I'm a huge advocate for things like saunas, even red light saunas. I know there's a lot of debate about real saunas versus red light, and but I we have a red light one and I use it,
They're amazing.
I'd say regularly. I mean, I wish I
Mhm,
used it more. Cold
mhm,
plunging is another thing I think is really like if you think about, let's say you're doing a, fairly intense workout. There's a lot of inflammation. So something like cold
mhm,
plunging really can help that. If you're out, riding 2, 3, 4, 5 hours and you get back, like it's really good to do. So there are things like that that, certainly I would say, not only do we write about and, certainly I advocate on a personal level, um, but I also think and there are many, many apps that people can download, whether it's for meditation, like I said, whether it's for
mhm,
food tracking, whether it's for different performance and training things, but there's also a case to be made for like really listening to your body,
mhm,
like almost disconnecting from the wearables at times to understand like what is just, if you listen closely enough, what is your core saying to you? Like, are you tired? Are you like, even if your ring is saying, "Hey, Robin, you're ready to go get it today. Like
mhm.
your recovery score is awesome, but I just feel crappy."
Yeah.
Right? Like, you
Mhm.
got to listen too, because there is, oftentimes your body will tell you things that maybe the devices don't have 100% perspective into.
Yeah, I think for me, when I found out that I could just do blood work and get my biomarkers back, that was huge because I was plunging like crazy, and they were like, "Hey, you grew up in South Florida, therefore there's an immense amount of mold in your system." And I was like, "Whoa, whoa!" And we said, "Okay, stop ice plunging." I was like, "Why am I stopped?" They're like, "Go get an IR sauna, sit in it every single day, twice a day. You got to detox this stuff out. You got to open your body up so you can get this mold. It takes time." So, getting those other data sets, getting those numbers that you can only figure out, figuring out where your DNA is and your SNPs based off your DNA, and figuring out how your body reacts to certain things, and gluten and histamines and all of these things across the board. That data is above and beyond. And I think, to your point, the best way to do this, and I know this is going to sound, get outside. I can hear my body better when I'm outside, I'm hiking in Switzerland, than I can anywhere else. So this just became a promotion for Switzerland. Go to
Yeah.
Switzerland.
Wait a minute.
So yeah,
Sponsored
there's your answer.
sponsored by Tourism Switzerland.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is for now. Go to Lucerne and just walk up and down. You'll be fine.
Yeah,
You'll
you'll
feel
be
much better
fine.
as a
Yeah,
human
you
being.
feel much better. Yeah.
So, if people want to feel better and they want to learn more about this and they want to track you down and get more information about you, Robin, how do they track you down? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
I mean, we have so many sites and so many products. I always tell people to just go like our one of our largest ones is Outside Online, and if
Mhm.
you go into the nav, you can see everything that we kind of have to offer. But create accounts, sign up for a membership. Start engaging with the content and the services that we have. Sign up for an event. That's a big way to sort of get you through the learning curve, and that could be everything from a 5K to a 10K to whatever endeavor you might want to, sign up for, but sign up for something because it will motivate you to do that. So, but you can find all that at outsideonline.com.
Robin, I really appreciate it. It's always fun talking to you. Thank you so
You
much.
too. Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Proven Podcast. Community builds momentum, data builds direction, execution builds results. Stop watching trends, start building ecosystems. While others chase attention, you could be creating platforms that last. Remember, if your strategy doesn't create real value, it was never proven to scale.